Hello, everyone. My name is Madhu Galapati, and I recently completed a PhD at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And today I'm excited to present you the findings of a study focused on the significance of dried fish value chains towards the well-being of fishing communities. And this study was conducted in Sri Lanka. As we know, dried fish is a subsector within small-scale fisheries, predominantly present in Asia and Africa. And the term dried fish refers to the processed fish using simple and low-cost methods, such as sun-drying, salting, and smoking. And dried fish make significant contributions to the well-being of coastal local livelihoods and economies. Dried fish activities are organized into value chains, which encompass a series of activities from fish harvesting to processing to trading to distribution and consumption. And these value chains are deeply gendered. In most contexts, women perform fish drying activities while men do the fish harvesting. However, our scholarly understanding about the dried fish value chains are very limited because dried fish as a subsector has received little attention in literature. Also, the dried fish activities by and large are not counted in fisheries data collection and therefore have rarely received any policy attention. The specific research objective which frames this study is on how women and men pursue well-being through their participation in dried fish value chains. And this objective is also aligned with the directions in gender research within fisheries, particularly in terms of the complexity of Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the blue economy narratives. So the study drew on two main areas of literature, value chains and social well-being. Value chain literature helped us understand the structural organization of dried fish activities through the nodes and linkages. For example, fish drying as a node that is linked to fish harvesting on the front, on the back end, and then fish trading in the front end. And the second body of literature, social well-being, emphasizes on what matters to people in terms of well-being, and it emphasizes three dimensions: the material, relational, and subjective dimensions of well-being. So the material aspects include income, employment, food, and the relational dimension include, for example, networks of contact, cultural ties, kinship ties, the social relations that provide scope for influence for people within these communities. And the subjective aspects include cultural values, meanings and perceptions associated with these livelihoods, and people's hopes and fears about the future. And because of the aspects that shape the well-being of women and men differently, the study also has an overarching focus on gender. So this study employed a case study approach, and the data was collected remotely using research assistants based in Sri Lanka because of the COVID-19 situation. There were two study locations, southwestern coastal, more urban site in Kalutara area, and a northeastern inland and a more rural site in Kantale area. And the data collection methods included field interviews conducted by the research assistants and virtual and phone-based key informant interviews that I completed myself. So the study showed that the two dried fish value chains operating in the two study locations are very different. In the coastal side, the value chain is more commercialized, and these drying operations are more of business-oriented operations run by the people who own the drying sites. And they employ hired labor and handle larger volumes of fish. The fishery in the coastal side include deep sea fishery as well as coastal inshore fisheries. And in comparison, the inland side is the fishery is freshwater lake-based fishery, and the value chain include family-run backyard operations that use family labor for the most part and handle much smaller quantities than the coastal value chain. And the findings show that many people participating in these value chains belong to socio-economically marginalized groups, such as the poor, people with lower levels of formal education, and people who in general have less options for livelihoods or employment. Especially for the women in fishing communities, fish drying might be the only livelihood or the income generation or the only option available for generating an income. And the marginalization in this subsector is also in part because of the hidden nature of dried fish activities within the fishery, and also dried fish as a food item. It is also hidden within the food industry and has not received any attention in the national economy in general. And another key difference in these two value chains are in relation to gendered participation. So in the coastal value chain, women mostly participate in the drying node, but they work only as wage workers. About 20% of the drying workforce in the coastal side are women. On the other hand, all the drying sites are owned and operated by men. Women do sell dried fish, but only within their villages, for example, in roadside stalls. So overall, men in the coastal value chain dominate the activities across the chain and handle larger volumes. And in comparison, in the inland side, women participate across the chain in all activities, including fishing in the lake, community, and men play more of a supportive role. So this brings us to the three-dimensional well-being, and to illustrate the findings, I will use quotes from my study participants to show the nuances in relation to the and he earns a small margin, and selling on credit is tricky because sometimes people don't pay back. There is clearly the earning potential, but this also shows the uncertainty and the debt-tied nature of their livelihoods. And these debts are mostly informal borrowings, and they pay back in smaller installments or using some of the dried fish that they produce. So the comment about small margins also resonate with the vulnerabilities associated with fishing livelihoods in general in small scale fisheries. Sorry. And even in the coastal, more business-oriented value chains, fish buying is predominantly on credit basis. The earnings also fluctuate seasonally, so the vulnerabilities are kind of showing similar patterns in both the value chains. In terms of the relational dimension, this is a woman from the inland community. She sells homemade dried fish and also fresh fish, and showing how value chain activities can overlap. Here, the same person is performing roles in the dry node as well as in the selling node. And she also sells fresh fish, which shows that the dried fish value chain also intersect with fresh fish activities and the fresh fish value chain. So this type of diversification or different activities is one way that they survive. And sometimes they also diversify beyond fisheries, and sometimes also they sell other local products like buffalo curds and vegetables. She also speaks to credit relations and trust, and mentions the involvement of family labor and how their neighborhood relations help her with her dried fish activities by giving her priority access to fish. She also says they know how hard I work. So this shows the sense of protection and the support that she receives within the close-knit networks. So this type of relational underpinnings came across strongly in both the value chains, showing how embedded these value chains are. There is, for example, a sense of obligation to fill orders using the fish that is dried in the neighborhood. So these community relations are absolutely important because they can foster community cohesion and also increase the capacity for collective action. This is what the subjective well-being looks like. This quote is from the coastal side, and she's a woman. She's a wage worker who says that people say different things, but she continues this job because what matters to her is the ability to support the family. So there are diverse societal perceptions associated with employment in dried fish value chains. And these perceptions work to influence people's decisions, especially women's decisions to continue this type of work. These perceptions are largely associated with outdoor working conditions. There is hardship in this job, partly because they are exposed to sunlight and salt all day long, and they have to stop their drying activities when the rain comes. So despite these hardships, they still derive satisfaction and have gratitude, as shown by this quote. They have gratitude towards their ability to make a living through this job and the ability to raise their families by continuing these activities. So in conclusion, the study findings shows that these value chains are of disproportionate importance to the socioeconomically disadvantaged people. And for the women in particular, they benefit from their ability to participate in the fishery through these value chains. Because, for example, in the coastal community, women do not fish. So dried fish activities provide them an opportunity to participate in the fishery at a broader scale. And there are trading restrictions, there are mobility restrictions that restrict their trading activities if they were to do fresh fish selling, for example. So in comparison, being in the dried fish provide them with an opportunity to earn an income and participate in the fishery. And relational underpinnings are also important. The study shows relational aspects such as trust, neighborhood relations, family ties can safeguard the producers and their community embedded livelihood activities. So the findings like this have implications on fisheries management and policy, and also on livelihood interventions towards better supporting the well-being of people, as well as the resources that they depend on. For example, fisheries policy and management should aim to assess the scale of dried fish subsector overall. And to do so, they need to expand their current enumeration efforts to capture all types of dried fish operations, including the seasonal, home-based, artisanal production, like the production that is happening in the Kantale study site. So the fisheries management can, if they know the full scale of dried fish activities, they can try to reposition dried fish value chains as an important segment of the fisheries post-harvest sector in Sri Lanka, and bring the much needed attention towards this subsector. So the insights like this are also relevant to other Asian and African countries with similar dried fish activities, although this particular study was conducted in Sri Lanka. That brings us to the end of my presentation. I'd like to acknowledge the funding partners of my research. Thank you very much for your.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. The paper is open for the discussion. Dr. Madhu, I have one question from you. In your conclusion that you mentioned, actually this dry fish farmer, the market actors are basically the socio-economically disadvantaged people. When you making that statement, did you compare the dried fish fishermen with respect to the other fishermen, or whether you compare it with the rest of the other employment?
Thank you for the question. That is a really interesting question, and an area that for sure require further study. Sorry. So in my case, the way that I saw dried fish is the way that I framed dried fish is as a subsector within fisheries. And then in my study, I did look at how dried fish sort of intersect with fresh fish activities as well. So the people who are in dried fish are also small scale fishers. Because, for example, some of the people who are owning, sorry, the cat, some of the people who are owning large scale drying sites in the, for example, in the Aquaculture area are also boat owners. So therefore, in terms of their roles, they overlap. And in reality, these chains also overlap to a large extent. Although we try to distinguish between the two for the purpose of study, in reality, they are all intertwined within the small scale fisheries. So in relation to the socio-economically disadvantaged, in terms of that sort of identification or the categorization, I think it is fair to say that the people who are participating in dried fish activities are in a way disadvantaged because the dried fish subsector itself is hidden and does not receive any attention. For example, when policy or the practice talks about fisheries, they also always refers to harvesting, and therefore the attention goes to the fishers, and therefore to men to a larger extent, because all the women are in the dried fish, sort of in the processing node. So those type of disadvantages exist, and also in relation to the point that you mentioned about the the marginalization with respect to other categories, that also happens because these are wage workers, and the general perception is that they they are sort of labeling that's happening, although these livelihoods contribute to a huge extent in terms of the rural economies. They are not sort of enumerated or counted because they fall within the informal sector. So that aspect is also there. But in terms of how significant these activities are in supporting this livelihood, that is I guess the main point that comes through the research in my case. And definitely further study needs to be done in order for us to better understand these aspects.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. Any more questions?
I just wondering, I'm Professor
Yes,
Ratnayya.
sure.
I just wondering to know that, do you have any idea about
Professor Kuraratna, could you please speak a little louder?
Yeah, I just wondering whether you are come across it. What is the main reason of motivating people into making dry fish? Is that because of excess demand or excess supply, or otherwise? Do they have, plan to be a dry fish maker?
That's also a very interesting aspect. So based on my understanding so far, there is several factors are at play in terms of sort of their motivation to participate in the sector, and one being how the fishery is run. So in the Kalutara site in particular, the main fishery is the deep sea fishery, and when the boats, multi-day boats land, they bring a significant in terms of weight, a considerable amount of salted fish, so that is partially processed fish. So at the resource and at the harvesting end, therefore there's a push towards dried fish drying, because that fish needs to be dried. And then also I came across a lot of fresh fish sellers who dry their own dry their excess harvest at the end of each day. And then there's also the huge local demand. So our data at this point is not very good, but based on the sort of the preliminary data we have, it seems like about 30 to 40% of the local demand is being met through local production, and the rest is through imported products. So that means there's a huge demand and sort of a market opportunity that the people in these communities also see, and they try to cater to that demand as well. So that also drives the production to a larger extent.
Any more questions? Okay, Dr. Madhu, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
With that, we will move to the next presentation. Jason, SPAK Madhura Singh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to present my presentation on the topic of GnRH-induced breeding and larval growth performance of Ompok silenensis on parthenogenic feed attitudes. This is the content which I am going to present during my presentation. Background: butter catfish, or in Sinhala we called as Valapotta, is an indigenous fish species in our country. It's a freshwater carnivorous catfish species has a high nutritional value. Butter catfish has a strongly complex elongated body. Its mouth position is superior with a lower jaw, which is longer than upper jaw. They have two pairs of barbels, and these are helped to gather sensors around the environment they live. There are purple and yellowish spots throughout the body of the fish. Cannibalism. Cannibalism is the act of killing and consuming the whole or the major part of an individual belonging to the same species or another species. And it is a major problem among indigenous fish species in Sri Lanka. This is a common and widespread phenomena which can be found throughout the animal kingdom. The intensity of the cannibalism would reach a maximum in early weeks of larvae. Heterogeneous size distribution often lead to social dominance which result for the aggressive behavior and cannibalism. Cannibalism is thus facilitated by the size heterogeneity. Smallest fish are consumed by the large fish. Moringa oleifera and Atenanthera sessilis. These are the two main ingredients I use in my research as feed ingredients. Feeding and nutritional condition of fish play a major role in fish processing industry. It includes the growth and development of fish to increase the health condition of the fish and to reduce the cost of feeds. Without an adequate feed supply, the growth rate of the fish will fall below the normal level. It causes for the cannibalism too. Phytogenic feed additives are derived from plant materials. They are naturally bioactive substances. When we fed fish with phytogenic feed additives, they develop the palatability of fish and also the gut health. Moringa oleifera. It is commonly found in Indian subcontinent. This plant is famous among the people for the nutritional as well as the medicinal properties. Fruits, bark, leaves, flowers, and unripened pods are consumed by the people. Moringa has high fatty content. It is used as livestock forage in some countries. As an example, in India, moringa tablets are available as animal feed. Mukunuenna or Altananthera sessilis. It is an perennial herb with prostrate stem. It contains alpha and beta spinasterol and lutein, which can isolate it from lutein. The leaves of plant contain galactose, and also in moringa it contain galactose. Apart from them, the jack or Artocarpus selenicus, water spinach, and Asparagus racemosus contain galactose. The objective. The objective of my research is to develop artificial breeding protocol to unbox solenensis in indoor conditions with GnRH hormonal treatment. To optimize indoor conditions to minimize cannibalism with phytogenic feed additives for the first time in Sri Lanka. To evaluate the growth performance with phytogenic feed additives. Now we move for the methodology. First, the brood stock selection. Then, cage prepared. Mature males and females were selected. These mature males and females were injected with GnRH hormone. Males were injected the GnRH hormone at the rate of 0.25 per kilogram, and for female 0.5 milliliters per kilogram. And we injected GnRH hormone in the evening, then kept them in the cages by 1:1 ratio. Individuals of butter catfish can be sexually mature at the stage of 2 years of age and prevail up to 6 years of age. Individuals produce egg masses during the month of April through July, up to 20,000 eggs. Mating occur mainly in water temperature between 21 degrees of Celsius to 30 degrees of Celsius. In the mating process, a male and female fish align next to each other in opposite directions and wrap their tails around their mate's head. Brood stock removed next day morning. Then eggs were treated with 2 ppm methylene blue. After eggs were hatched, fed with Artemia by 2-hour interval. For each cage, 2 or 3 almond or Terminalia cotapa leaves were added. Tank preparation. Clean the tanks 3-4 times and kept 1 week for drying. Then filled water up to 8 inches. A black polythene was placed at the bottom. After that, introduce Dabna magna to the tanks. Then same size, same age and widespread long-rooted Japan jabber or 8-hornia crassipes added for 10 plants in one tank. By cleaning and removing unwanted plant parts, we have to add it to the tanks. Larvae introduction. Count the fish larvae and put them into the tanks. 270 fish larvae were added to one tank. That means 3 larvae per liter. Fed with Artemia and Daphnia. From the starting of 4th week of age, we started to feed these larvae by using formulated feed. This is the treatment chart. I used treatment 1 as the Alternanthera containing feed. As treatment 2 used Moringa oleifera containing feed. As control feed, the feed which used in the center used as control feed. Now we move for the result and the discussion part. Dissolved oxygen, pH and temperature of the water tanks were measured at the 2 days of interval by using digital pH and DO meters. Ammonia and nitrite were measured before and after siphoning. When the quality of water reduces, tanks were siphoned by removing 2/3 of water and refill the same amount of water. They were in the acceptable range, so I didn't include them in my presentation. The specific growth rate. The figure shows how the specific growth rate changes according to the time. The T1 or the Alternanthera sessilis contain feed, and T2, the Moringa oleifera contain feed. Consumption increases with the time as they need some time to adapt for the feed. Weight gain. The weight gain of the fish increases both in feeds contain Alternanthera sessilis and Moringa oleifera with the time. Survival percentage. The highest survival percentage is in treatment 1 and the second highest from treatment 3 or the control feed. The lowest one in the treatment 2, the Moringa oleifera. There was no effect by feed on the survival percentage of the fish. Now we move for the conclusion. Conclusion, the butter catfish can be promoted as a food fish in our country. Alternanthera and Moringa can use to improve the growth as well as to reduce the cannibalism. To reduce the cannibalism, it is needed to change their genetic structure. In comparison with other cultivable exotic fish species, due to high market demand and there is a high potential to culture butter catfish in Sri Lanka. Also, due to this current economic situation of our country, it is very difficult to import fish meal as it costs high amount of dollars. If we can introduce fish feed contain moringa and alternanthera, then it is good to overcome from this feed problem. That is the end of my presentation, and I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to Professor Mrs. N.Y. Hirumothugada, Senior Lecturer of Department of Animal Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Dr. Mrs. Kumudu R. Gamage, the Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, and Mr. A.R. Mudalige, Fish Genetic Specialist, National Aquaculture Development Authority. And also, I would like to thank all those who provide information and help me in the numerous ways during the period of study to make it success. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you very much, Sama. The paper is open for the discussion. We can have one or two quick questions.
I have a quick question for Amma.
Sure. Good, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Amma, for sharing your findings. Really interesting. And given the current situation, there seem to be huge implications in terms of promoting indigenous species as food, and also using the potential for using local ingredients as feed and in improving their growth. I'm curious about the practical implications of the findings of your study. What is the from a practical perspective, what are some of the challenges or the potential that we have in order for us to be able to promote fish species like this, and also in using feed ingredients like this? What challenges do we have in terms of translating your findings perhaps into practical implications?
Yes, madam. Thank you very much for your valuable advices. Because lack of the knowledge among the people is the main point, and also it is difficult to find in sometimes the moringa and alternanthera. And also, if we try to find those things, we can find the food items such as moringa and alternanthera, and also the lack of the knowledge among the people is the main the difficulty we have to face when popular this research among the local people. If we try to do this, we can I think we can do it.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Amma.
Thank you very much, madam.
Ma, did you measure the survival sequentially, or you just measured it at the end of the experiment?
So I measured at the end of the experiment.
Yes. Palpita, you want to ask something?
Hello, good morning. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Amma, thank you for the nice presentation. I have a little concern in the survival percentages. You explained that there is no effect from the treatment, but in your conclusions, you said that sorry, I was disconnected. I'm not sure that I can be heard.
No, we couldn't.
In the results slides, in the survival, she explained that there is no effect from the treatments. But in the end, for the conclusions, she has said that the incorporation of these phyto ingredients can reduce the cannibalism. But it seems to me a little mismatch. Do you have any particular explanation for this, Amma?
Sir, cannibalism is the main point that occur to reduce the survival of these fish. The cannibalism is occur due to the lack of the feed. So if we provide sufficient amount of feed for these fishes, so we can get the reduce the cannibalism, and we can increase the survival rate of the fish. So it is okay. So the explanation.
Okay, let's keep it that way for the moment. Thank you, Amma.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amma. At the same time, you better to recheck the definition of the cannibalism, which you have mentioned at the very first slide. Please revisit it later and try to update it. Right? With that, we will move to the next presenter. The study is the assessing the climate change vulnerability in Sri Lankan coastal fishing community. Authors are APGL Sandaruwan, TWLU Silva, HML Amarala.
Good day for all. My research is assessing climate change vulnerability in Sri Lankan coastal fishing communities. My research team include KPGL Sandurwan, Mrs. DWLU De Silva, Mr. KHML Amarla. This project funded by NARA. Actually, climate change is very hot topic in these days. What is the climate change? Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather pattern. These shifts may be natural, such as through variation in solar cycle, but anthropogenic activities can exacerbate this climate change. Most people are doubt about really climate change is happening. I can give the answer for this question. Please look at that table. It's a trend analysis for last half century. In here, they have analyzed data for annual temperature, daytime maximum temperature, sea level, and island-wide annual precipitation of Sri Lanka. In here, we can see some temperature parameters are increasing, sea level also increase, but precipitation slightly decrease. In the precipitation, it's not about the volume of annual water, it's about changing patterns of the rainfall. In the right side of this table, they have some researchers have forecasted data for next 20 years. Under this, we can see these climate changes may be highly exaggerate within these few years. As well, we can see in this graph, it's explaining how many people affected from natural hazard statistic. In the early 1980, we can see very few people affected comparatively and mostly occur drought and flood. But in recent past, 2010 to 2020, there are so many natural hazards occurred and many people become victims of these natural hazards. Therefore, we have to accept climate change is happening. This climate change problem is very important for Sri Lanka because according to the Green Watch Institute, they have developed a climate change, climate risk index for the all countries annually. So, for the 2018, 2019, and 2020, Sri Lanka always in the top among the top 10 countries. That means Sri Lanka has a great problem to face these climate change problems. When we concern about all other geographical area, coastal area is somewhat highly vulnerable because the fishermen, most of the fishermen and coastal communities dealing with sea, and they have faced huge cyclone, storms, and ecosystem changes because of this climate change. Therefore, we cannot ignore these coastal how we cannot ignore the studies of how coastal communities face this climate change. My research objective is to assess the intensity of vulnerability to climate change and its impacts on coastal small-scale fishing communities of Sri Lanka. We use very simple index to measure the vulnerability. It's include exposure, sensitivity, and adaptation. Under the exposure, we are measure how what is the extent of people exposed for the climate change. And sometimes because of the climate change risk factors, they may have faced difficult damages, injuries, deaths, or sometimes their valuable items and properties may be destroyed, and they have a threat for not only the current threat, sometimes it may be a future threat, and those things are studies under exposure. Sensitivity and study what extent they are sensitive for this climate change. Food dependence on the fisheries, income dependence of the fisheries, salience distance, number of day hours spent at sea, these kind of parameters identified by different previous researchers. As adaptation indicators, the different kind of mitigation, coping, and adaptation activities implemented by people to face this climate change. For example, sometimes people may change their fishing gears, fishing craft, and sometimes they have developed different infrastructure facilities and structures to prevent this climate change, to avoid the bad hazards. These are included under adaptation capacity. Under methodology, we have interviewed 200 fishermen and we conducted 8 focus group discussion for the different fisheries district, Batiklo, Gol, Hambantota, Jaffna, Mathura, Negombo, and Trincomalee. In each district, we selected 25. This 25 consisted of 7 small size motorboats and 6 multi-day boats, 6 non-mechanized traditional boat, and 6 beach scene fishermen. In here, we use very simple index because we take each index value and we calculated we normalize the data and finally calculate average values. These indicators values finally we use for the statistic test, ANOVA, and some regressions. These are some photographs we taken from while we collecting data and Negombo, Gol, Batiklo, and different species, the different zones. Actually, in here we have good chance to get talk with the peoples and get first-hand experience how they are struggling with these climate change related hazards. And under the results and discussions, in this table discuss what kind of climate related risk faced by the fishing communities. Especially coastal erosion is many people have some first-hand experience. And then sea level lagoon and sea level rise also people experiencing. I mean, flood, cyclone, these things, no, all the community people are not experiencing, but some people have direct, some people face direct for these climate hazards. The important thing is they think the occurrence frequency is increasing with the time and hazardous severity and damages, level of the damages happen also increasing with the time. And these negative impacts make huge problem for their livelihood activities. In this chart, we try to understand different fisheries district, what are the main climate-related hazards for each district. According to this table, we can understand Jaffna is the highly vulnerable fisheries district because they are faced more cyclone and seawater intrusion problem than other areas. As well, Putlam has a problem in sea level lagoon crossing problems. Likewise, different districts, fishermen's number of fishermen and percentage of the fishermen telling these are highly problematic for us. Then we included to this table and identified which districts fishermen highly struggle with the climatic problems. In these slides, we try to understand some climate change impact qualitatively. These data we generated from the focus group discussions. According to the peoples, because of this flash flood, cyclones, sea level rise, those kind of climate risks, some bad impact can happen. Sometimes they may be injured, death, and damage for the craft and household. And because of this bad weather, their cost of production increase, the quality of the post-harvest, their harvest is lost, and sometimes post-harvest post-harvest quality deteriorate, and most of their harvest may be destroyed. And those kind of problems they are experiencing because of this risk problem. And indirect impact is the fish harvest can be severely reduced because of this climate hazard, and it may be generated scarcity of the protein sources, reduced fish supply, increase fish, increase the price. Those kind of problems we can understand through this climate change impact. In here, we calculated financial losses. In here, we asked from the people what are the direct financial losses they experience, and sometimes because of the bad weather and this climate hazardous, number of days and number of weeks they cannot go to the fishing, and there is some opportunity cost for them, and sometimes they have invest money for recover to destroy items, and sometimes they may be invested money for the adaptation techniques. All the things comes under these financial losses, and we understood Jaffna fishers annually spend much higher money for this to prevent this this climate impact. In here, we're talking about some adaptation techniques. Sometimes fishermen can alter their fishing activities. Some people change their landing sites, some people change their target species, and some people use many hooks for their long line, or some people increase the number of pieces in nets. And this kind of fishing activity changes they have done as adaptation. And sometimes they require the supporting services. That means early warning system and weather forecast alert system, and they want first-hand experience, loan and subsidies to rebuild after this climate change. Those kind of supportive services some people use as adaptation. And collective action also needed. Some landing sites already recruited some volunteer fishermen. When someone faces a accident in the sea, or sometime if they have a very sudden flood, these volunteer people help others to help to victims and to rescue their lives and properties. Sometimes they have revolving funds and some funding activities, and to compensate these damages.
You need to wind up the presentation.
Very few communities have done some environmental protection activities. They clean.
Sorry about that. We had to stick with the time. That's why we had to post you. Any questions regarding the presentation? Sandaruan, if you are here, could you, for the benefit of the audience, Sandaruan, could you quickly take just 10-20 seconds and tell what are the final conclusion of your project?
Actually, it's very sorry because very important part is in the latter part, and I couldn't make it on time because I tape this. I make this video from my
No, it's okay.
handphone. Yeah, I'm very sorry for that. Actually, this is a small part of a large project, and it has a three component. One is preparing this kind of vulnerability index, and using this vulnerability index, we identify what kind of peoples and what geographical areas are more highly vulnerable. And second part is what is the relationship between vulnerability and well-being. And third part is develop a vulnerability vulnerability COPA framework to help the peoples. I just present here what is the vulnerability index and how we can use to identify the different categories and how we can prioritize these peoples. And I develop some regression to identify the factors which are the most important to develop adaptation plan. That's
Okay, what was the outcome? The outcome is to develop the plan.
yeah, actually it's preparing a policy framework and identify the what are the institute we can get help and what are the activities done by
Okay, right.
communities and other institutes.
Right, okay. Any questions?
Mr. Sundarwan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
I don't know whether you could briefly mention about your econometric model. You said you have done some regression. Very, very briefly, what you did and, outcome, if you can, quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, actually what we did is we prepare a vulnerability index and we regress it with the all other parameters, especially demographic parameters, and identify remove some parameters which have multicollinearity effects and some statistic effects. And finally we selected few variables and prepare a linear log model to explain this impact, some important criteria.
Okay, thank you. We don't have time to go into that. Yeah, I just want to, I was a little bit interested about what kind of results we have got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Sundarwan, and I'm sorry we need to stick with the time. So with that, we will move to the next presenter. Growth performance and the survivability of Catla, private with different level of two culturable mushrooms in Sri Lanka. Authors are PM Vitanage, NP Ratnayaka, and UPK Eva.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to present our research work, growth performance and survival of Catla fry fed with different levels of two cultivable mushrooms in Sri Lanka. Catla is an economically important freshwater fish species in Sri Lanka. It is one of the Indian major carp and it was introduced in 1980. Catla is mainly cultured in perennial tanks, seasonal tank and ponds. Its body is short and deep, laterally somewhat compressed. It has a prominent head compared to the other Indian carps. Catla grows up to the 40 kilograms or more in size. There's a high potential to develop Catla fish production and introduce value-added products from the excess fish harvest. Catla attain its maturity in second year. Natural breeding does not occur in captivity. Catla is mainly bred in aquaculture development centers in centers of NACDA. In this life cycle, we require to pay attention about the post larvae, fry and fingering. Post larvae obtained from yolk sac absorption of the larvae after 72 hours. After post larvae is reared for 21 days in nursery tank, we can obtain fry. Fry is 2.5 to 3 centimeters in long. After fry is reared in rearing tank for 45 to 60 days, fry goes up to the fingerling level. Fingerling sent to the farmers for stocking reservoirs and food fish ponds. Fry is reared in aquaculture development centers, private ponds, and mini nurseries in different areas in Sri Lanka. Mushroom is part of a structure of certain fungi. Mushrooms were taken as human food for 1,000 years. Mushrooms are rich in protein, carbohydrate, vitamins, fibers, and essential amino acids. Mushroom is protein-rich food. Protein content is 20% to 40%. It's dependent on the species and culture media. Carbohydrate of mushroom composed with the structural polysaccharide, beta-glucan, chitin, hemicellulose, and pectic substances. Mushroom is good source of dietary fiber, iron, phosphorus, and some antioxidants also. There are two types of mushrooms are common in Sri Lankan market: abalone mushroom and oyster mushroom. Abalone mushroom is medium to large in size. Skin is smooth and silky. Upper color is brown. It has spongy, meaty texture. Oyster mushroom is white in color. It can be found as clusters. What is beta-glucan? Beta-glucan is a type of food fiber found in cell wall of certain plants, mushrooms, and seaweeds. It helps to activate certain type of immune cells, including macrophages, neutrophils, and monocytes. It shows boost protection against parasitic bacterial and viral pathogens. It improves blood sugar management and also promote heart health. Our research problem was survival rate of catla in nursery and rearing pace is comparatively low than other Indian carp. Our objective was determination of growth performance of catla fry, identification of the feed for catla which have higher survival rate, identification of the most relevant inclusive levels of oyster mushroom and abalone mushroom to a commercial carp feed. Research was conducted in Fish Nutrition Research, Development and Training Section available, NAGDA, Sri Lanka. 4 diets were prepared using 2 levels of oyster mushroom and abalone mushroom. 2% and 5% levels, both mushroom were incorporated to commercial carp feed. The commercial carp feed have 27 crude protein and 90% of crude lipids. Commercial carp feed was used as a control diet without incorporating mushrooms. All treatment were replicated. An experiment was carried out in 15 concrete tanks. Size of the tank was 3 meter into 1 meter into 0.5 meter. 200 fish from same progeny were stocked in each tank. Initial body weight was 0.37 and total length was 3.23 centimeter. Fish were fed 12% in first 4 weeks, then 8% for second 2 weeks and 6% for last 4 weeks of their body weight. Feeding frequency was 3 times per day. Data collection, body weight, total length, standard length were measured in every 14 days after stocking. Water temperature, dissolved oxygen, ammonia, pH and total alkalinity were measured in twice per week. Water quality was maintained by the changing 2/3 of tank water twice a week. All experimental feeds were analyzed for proximate combustion. Statistical analysis were carried out by the one-way ANOVA, and mean comparison was made by Turkey's pairwise test. Results and discussion. There's no significant difference in water quality parameters among the treatments. Water quality parameters were within optimum levels for cattle production. Proximate combustion of mushroom diet were almost same. Abalone mushroom has higher crude protein and ash content than the oyster mushroom. Final body weight varied from 1.29 to 1.66 gram. There's no significant difference among the treatment. This is final body weight vs the experimental time. Total body length also did not show.
Whether the recording stopped, or do you have one more slide on your conclusion?
Yes, I have more.
Yeah, Manjula.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have more slides and final conclusion. Like that.
Yeah. Can you mention about your conclusion?
Yes, my conclusion was the both level of mushrooms in abalone mushroom has higher survival rate, significantly higher survival rate than the other feeds.
Right. Thank you, Mandula. So the paper is open for the discussion. Okay, with the absence of the questions, we will move to the next. Thank you very much, Manjula. Thank you very much for presenting. The next study, Chlamydia illusions larvae, meal last fish meal replacer for Cyphoporus maculatus diet. Authors are MKC Priyadarshana, CN Walpeter, HAD 1 Deepika, and MPS Magamudu.
Into my research area. So, as you all know, feed is considered as the one of the most costly input in the livestock farming, including the aquaculture also. However, for the preparation of feed, a protein source, energy source, fat source, vitamin and mineral sources were used. Anyway, it is the most concern in the preparation of feeds. As you can see in the figure, this is called the fish meal, a meal prepared from fish or fowls, served as one of the foremost protein source within the past few decades. However, at the present, due to scarcity and the expensive nature, fish meal is no longer the foremost protein source. Therefore, feed manufacturers all over the world tend to move towards alternative protein sources such as cottonseed meal, soybean meal like plant protein sources, and feather meal, insect meals, blood meals like animal protein sources. Therefore, in this study, our concern was to replace the so-called fish meal by using meals prepared from insects. For that, we have selected and it's called black soldier fly. The larval stages of this so-called black soldier fly is comprised of high protein content. Therefore, it could be used as a better alternative for fish meal. So for that, we have prepared a meal from the so-called larval stage of the black soldier fly, and this is the approximate composition of the prepared meal. After that, we were supposed to prepare feed or the experimental diet for the Scyphophorus maculatus by using the so-called black soldier fly larval meal. Actually, Scyphophorus maculatus or platy fish is one of the most demanded ornamental fish species being cultured in the Sri Lanka for the exporting purpose. And as you can see, we had 4 experimental diets by replacing 4 levels. I mean 0%, 12.5, 25, and 37.5% of fish meal using so-called black soldier fly larval meal. These were the all ingredients that were prepared, that were used for the preparation of the experimental diets. So after preparation of the experimental diets, then the feeding trial was conducted in the this tank system, and also the feeding trial was continued up to 81 days. So as per the results, we observed that the replacement of fish meal by the black soldier fly larval meal was extremely possible, up to 25%, and however, beyond the 25%, or the 37.5% black soldier fly larval meal incorporation had extremely retarded the growth performances of the platy fish. This graph will further elaborate the results, and as you can see, the final body weights and the final body length has been extremely or significantly higher at 12.5 and 25% diets compared to the other 2 diets, and However, the body length gain, especially growth rate like parameters were extremely higher at both 0%, 12.5 and 25% diets when compared to the 37.5% diet. And also specifically the feed conversion ratios so extremely good at 0%, 12.5% diet, 25% diet than those of the 37.5% diet. So when you jump into the conclusion, it can be concluded that the 25% fish meal replacement by using black soldier fly larval meal as the most ideal level of black soldier fly larval meal to be used in the diets of platy fish without compromising the growth performances, and also the ideal fish meal replacement by using the black soldier fly larval meal was 25%, and it accounts for around 6.65% reduction for the kilogram when compared with the control diet. So these are my acknowledgements, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Priyadarshan. The paper is open for the discussion. So in your presentation, you showed 37 or 35% VSFL diet. The fish which fed with that diet seems to be a little smaller, or in other words, the growth is a little lower. At the same time, their color is more towards the darker side. Is there any effect with the feed or what it is? Sorry, we cannot hear you properly.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
So actually, this is only one part of my research. And in this research, actually, we do not evaluate the color parameters. And as you have said, but there is no such effect have been observed.
All right, okay. Perhaps with the photographs, I might have misunderstood it.
Yes. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Priyadarshan.
Thank you.
So with that, we will move to the next presentation. Sugar grass seed meal as a replace of the maize in Catla feed. Authors are A.G.A. Chaturangani, C.N. Walpita, M. Navinam, and P.M. Vithanagiri.
Hello, good morning. On behalf of the authors, Ms. Chaturangani and Mr. Navinan and Mr. P.M. Vithanagiri, I am here to present you about sugar grass seed meal as a replacer for maize in Catla feeds. I'm C.N. Walpita. If we take fish feed industry, generally it accounts about 60% of the total operational costs if we consider the feed cost in aquaculture. And this is quite a significant value, especially in small scale and rural aquaculture operations. Also with culture-based fisheries, where the initial part of the fish culture is done in aquaculture operations. In fish feeds, basically a lot of plant-based materials are used, in particular for carbohydrates and also lipid sources. Basically, they are for energy. Let me bring into you a new situation we are facing at the moment. This is a feed crisis. Due to the problems in the country, and we are facing a lot of additional problems in the feed industry as well, particularly corn. If we look at corn production, it's reduced to a great degree due to fertilizer problems. And importation of corn is also limited. So now, at the moment, we are facing a scarcity of corn. And the low production and import restrictions on maize has created this problem, and this limited supply has a drawback for aquaculture feed production, because in aquaculture, our volumes are smaller than the animal feed production sectors. Therefore, corn is less available for fish seed production. Therefore, it is imperative to have a replacer for corn, however, without compromising the food safety for the people. So corn is a human food as well, and any replacer we are using should not be with the interest for human. In this line of thinking, we have an alternative energy source. This is non-food type, and we call it sugar grass. Sugar grass is a hybrid sorghum variety introduced to Sri Lanka some time back and now cultured as cattle feed in Sri Lanka in large quantities. And the advantage of this is it has very high levels of sugar content. And this is about 35% of the dry matter. And looking at the nutritional composition, it has about 4,000 kilocalories per kilogram energy, a very good energy source, and a marginal level of crude protein, 10.8. So this is a potential plant material to be used as a corn replacer. Now, our objective is to evaluate the effect of using sugar grass as a dietary ingredient on the growth performances of cattle. And cattle is the number one species that are caught and they are fingerlings. Their seeds are produced in aquaculture stations. So our objective is to check whether sugar grass incorporation has any effect on the growth performances of these fish small stages. And we conducted this research in Carp Breeding Center, Udawalawa, the Nagda station. And first, we made a ration. We prepared a ration based on sugar grass seeds, and it consists with 38% crude protein, 7.5% crude fat, and energy level of 3,100 kilocalories per kilogram. These are the requirements given by FAO for the cattle. So we prepared sugar grass meal based on sugar grass seeds and incorporated that into cattle feeds. And this is a replacement diet. So we serially replaced corn or the maize, 25% incorporation, 50% incorporation, 75% incorporation, and 100% incorporation. This is in relation to the maize. So the content of maize is gradually reduced by 25% by increasing the addition of sugar grass. So we have 4 treatment diets and a control diet. And we did this with cattle fry stage. And we performed this in concrete tanks, and fishes were introduced into the concrete tanks, acclimatized them, And before the startup of the experimentation, the initial weight and the length of the fish were recorded. Then we continued feeding our experimental diets for 42 days, and weight and the body length were measured at 14 days, 28 days, and 42 days. And different body parameters were recorded, and based on that, growth indices were calculated. Check the nutritional composition of our prepared diets are in line with the requirements of the CATLA. So the checking the proximate composition of the ingredients, we have found that sugar grace has more protein, crude protein, than the yellow maize, and also high energy compared to the available energy in maize. However, the diets we prepared are 38% crude protein generally, and also 3,100 kilocalories per kilogram energy. So the diets we prepared, formulated, are in line with our expectations. So after feeding, let's see what happened. This is the body weight of the experimental animals. So up till 14 days, we haven't seen any difference. But at 28 days, the differences are already visible. If you can see here, 25% incorporation of sugar grace meal has produced the diet, 25% incorporation and 50% incorporation diets gave the same performances, or I would say similar performances, whereas 75 and 100% incorporation has caused marginal decrease of the body weight. We have observed similar patterns in total length as well, where at 42 days, control diet, 25% incorporation and 50% incorporation has been in the same level. Looking at the weight gain, so highest weight gains were recorded at zero incorporation or the control diet, 25% incorporation and 50% incorporation. Length gain, the same story, 25% and 50% incorporation of sugar grace meal has caused no difference to the performance of the control group. However, 75% and 100% incorporation has caused less length and weight gains. Specific growth rate, same story, 25 and 50% incorporations caused no differences compared to the control diet. And feed conversion ratio, the best feed conversion ratios, the lower values, are obtained in control diet, 25% diet, and 50% incorporation diets. And there is no effect on the survival rate from the feeds we are giving, or we have given. As far as the cost is concerned, there is a marginal reduction of cost by incorporation of sugar grace meal, because sugar grace seeds are comparatively cheaper than corn seeds. And this is the situation by the time we conducted the experiment. And nowadays, this change has been increased because the sugar grace seeds are not expensive, but corn seeds are very expensive. So this value must be quite high at this moment. So in conclusion, sugar grace meal could be used for the partial replacement of maize in the diets of cattle fry up to a rate of 50%. This is without compromising the growth. This can be a very good achievement for small-scale aquaculture operations where people formulate their own feed with limited resources. So sugar grass can be a good option for them. And I would like to acknowledge the support given by the head of the department, Professor T.S.P. Jayavira, and also our laboratory staff, including Mrs. SACSFA. And these are our references.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Balkita. The paper is open for the discussion. Any questions from the audience? Dr. Valpete, if I have understood correctly, because there were some interruptions in the middle due to the internet issues from my end, I guess. When actually there was no such a big difference between the control as well as 25%.
Yeah, yes.
In both the growth as well as in the survival.
Yes.
Growth, survival, and the length. But
Yeah.
the price is little lower.
Yes, true. The objective was to find %25% and also 50% can have the similar results. Therefore, it's a good replacer.
Okay. So any advantage that would like to highlight for going for 50 rather than 25?
Well, there is now a big advantage from the economic side because if we can replace 50% of the corn, now the corn seeds are very expensive compared to the time we have done the experiment. So there is a economical advantage without compromising the growth.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Thanks for the explanation.
Thank you.
So with that, we will conclude the sessions. We had a very good session. We were discussing about the value chain aspects and GnRH hormones, and even we discussed about the climate change, and then several aspects of the feed and also the survival of catla as well as the Poicilia, some species. So thank you very much for all the presenters. I wish good luck and all the very best for them. So I will hand this over to the main control room.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dileepa de Cruz, Mr. Suraj Chandrakumara, and all the presenters for your kind patience and cooperation towards the success of this session. And at the same time, I beg your pardon for the inconvenience caused by the technical issues as well. So thank you very much and wish you all to have a nice day.